As Disney continues to have major issues, whether it is Victoria Alonso angry and ready to spill the beans on the mouse, whether it is Jonathan Majors and all of that headache, whether he's innocent or guilty or what have you, that's another fire. Whether it's Karen McCarthy at Lucasfilm filing a lawsuit. Disney has so many issues, and that's not even covering the fact that their media is struggling to gain a foothold, whereas once upon a time, they were the absolute king, queen, and everything else on the court when it came to theaters. Well, with the void opening up now, with Disney vacating the box office in terms of success, there are others who are joining the fight. And one of those is a company, you might say, that Disney should greatly fear. Let's take a bite out of that apple right now. Explaining entertainment, keeping you ahead of the culture curve. It's what we do each and every day here on the WDW Pro channel, and we are once again at that task. A while ago, we talked about the threat that Disney was facing when it came to John Lasseter joining Apple, and then Apple using his talents to drive content of an excellent, high quality, at a classic Pixar quality going forward. And we discussed that our sources were telling us now that Apple is planning to take on Disney directly, not simply at the theaters, but rather taking on Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios directly, with John Lasseter at the helm of their animated stuff. We did not know at the time just how ferociously Apple was going to jump into this box office fight, but we do have some idea now. And the now is that Apple, in the present tense, is preparing to begin their efforts at the box office with an opening salvo of about $1 billion. To help us navigate all of this stuff that Disney is now facing is Lorn Connor. Lorn Connor of thatparkplace.com, which, by the way, has just relaunched for the past 5 months. That website has had some issues with the hosting company. And who knows if that was intentional or just incompetent. But whatever the case may have been with the former hosting company, that's gone now, and that website is ready to once again rocket forward. Lorn Connor is a writer there. Lorn, welcome to the channel.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's our joy, our pleasure. Let's go straight into this. As we do, folks, if you like content like it, click the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms when you click it. We're talking about the notification bell. Apple prepares to take on Disney head-to-head at the box office. This from March 24th, although if you check out the description below this video, you'll see that the prediction that we had, the sources that we had telling us that Apple was going to do this come from significantly farther in the past, and it was a big video. We had lots of views on it, so it's a major receipt. But this article is by me from 2 days ago. I do want to use it, though, as our foundation for this conversation. Disney faces a threat unlike anything it has seen in decades. Although major outlets are confirming my report from 2 weeks ago about Apple's box office entry, they're missing the bigger story, and I do think this is key. On March 8th of this year, a major exclusive was brought to the attention of the media when I announced via a source that Apple was planning to enter into the box office game by directly targeting Disney. The plan is simple. Now that Apple has John Lasseter leading SkyDance Animation, Lasseter, the former head of Pixar and guru of all things family content at Disney, why not have SkyDance compete with Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios? And though Apple has never been a major player in cinemas in the past, note here that Apple has been somewhat involved in the box office, but we're talking about, infinitesimally small compared to any of the major studios or Disney. Disney is clearly in the weakest position we've seen in decades. Now that leak has been confirmed, although the media is missing the bigger story. According to a number of outlets, Apple is indeed planning to jump into the box office industry, putting Apple TV movies into box office runs before they go into streaming. For 2023, the financial dedication to this opening salvo is impressive. Apple plans to spend about $1 billion with a B and making sure that they get their foot solidly in the door. That's nowhere close to what Disney and other traditional box office behemoths spend on movie making, but it's not a small amount either. While Disney released 16 movies, 16 in 2022, Apple will only be launching their box office attempts with a handful of films in 2023. And here's a quote from Next TV, Uh, they, citing Bloomberg, Apple has committed to spending $1 billion a year to become a serious distributor of blockbuster movies in the global theatrical marketplace. And sure, Apple has dabbled at the box office before, but nothing remotely serious. Still, the major trades and media are missing the most aspect of what is happening here. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, that's why you come to this channel. That's why we are experiencing tremendous growth, almost at 10,000 subscribers, where we will be turning on memberships and having all kinds of unique rewards for being a member that I don't think you'll find anywhere else. It's also why we've started a live show on Thursdays, 5 to 7, called The Pro Show, because we're attempting each and every day to give you information that you won't find in the major trades, in the publications, in the access and legacy media. We try to be as truthful and as revealing as possible, and we're always aiming to get better and better. Though Apple is getting its feet wet in 2023 with a major box office push, the real news is 2024. That's when we're likely to get John Lasseter's first real film from SkyDance, talking about luck there. And that film, Spellbound, is coming to theaters as a direct competitor to Disney's Pixar films. That means not only does Disney now have to contend with a blossoming Nintendo cinematic universe, the Minions, a potentially rebirthed Shrek franchise, and more, but now they're also going against the man who seems to have been largely responsible for their decades-long run of animated successes, going all the way back to the mid-90s. So, and by the way, here is the video if you guys want to go find this. Pixar in Trouble, we talked about this. That one was featuring Valiant Renegade and Jonas J. Campbell, now from about 2.5 weeks ago. All right, Lorn, as Disney vacates the success that they once had, and Disney was, they were just tremendous when it came to the product. And as a result, the market rewarded them over and over and over. But as Disney has now slid out of that pattern of success, it seems that other companies are realizing that there is an opening that they can fill very quickly. Lorn, tell me, you're an expert when it comes to Star Wars, specifically. In your opinion, where would Disney be right now if Star Wars, instead of where we're at, if it was as popular as it had been, let's say, when The Force Awakens first opened? What would the landscape look like for Disney in that situation?
Make sure to catch The Pro Show Thursdays 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment Explained, The Culture Curve Conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.
Well, if a studio like Apple was let's say that they had the rights to the franchise and they were going to do either new movies or shows or spinoffs like Disney Plus is doing right now, if what they were going to do was try to transition to a new generation of Jedi Knights, for instance, then that's something that I think that Disney failed to do. They wanted to jump straight into their big theatrical release. They wanted to go straight to the brand new characters while marginalizing the original trilogy characters that were still on the table that people really wanted to see the aftermath of their stories. I think that what Disney really needed was a transitional step where you still had those characters being relevant and directing what came after the Empire while setting up new characters to branch off to new storylines to do a more natural handoff. Something more akin to what Disney originally did with the Marvel Cinematic Universe when they introduced their characters and their own origin stories, got 1 or 2 movies under their belt before they did the big crossover with the Avengers. That's something that Disney probably should have pursued in that way, but instead wanted to go straight into, these are our new characters, they're front and center. The old characters are failures of one kind or another, and you should forget about them and see what these new people are. So
now, Lorn, let's talk about Marvel for a moment. You were in the video yesterday morning with a large panel, the largest we've done in terms of a pre-recorded video. And we were discussing just all of the drama facing Disney right now. In particular, I'm thinking, although there are plenty that we could discuss, but I'm specifically thinking about the Jonathan Majors situation where, and I'm so glad that we covered it the way we did, because we were extraordinarily careful, and we were extraordinarily careful because we're not foolish. Well, at least we try not to be foolish, right? Because that's how you suffer consequences when you're foolish. And we don't want to suffer consequences when we have tens of thousands of people watching us and listening to us. We're going to try and be fair and truthful. But, we were really careful about Jonathan Majors because now, today, there are people out there who say, oh, well, he's got a history of abuse, and we're so glad this is finally coming out. You also have his attorney saying that they will be fully vindicated and they have the proof that they can get, these charges dismissed. And neither you nor I have any idea the validity of any of this. I mean, it's completely out of our control whether any of this is true on either side, but it sure is a massive headache for Marvel. And I'm just curious. It seems to me that Marvel, in addition to having that headache, that they have followed the path of Star Wars after Marvel was so successful for so long, taking a path that was completely different than Star Wars. Why do you think that Disney seems intent on doing over and over the same mistakes that led the sequel trilogy to be sort of a downward trend on everything in a galaxy far, far away? Why has that went into Marvel and into their animated stuff?
Well, I think the circumstances are a little different between Lucasfilm and the Marvel Studios, but they have some of the same problems. One of the things that I think you can see in common between Lucasfilm and Marvel is that they have gone in various ideological directions that can alienate half of the audience. That's a
Exactly.
that's a major problem. But I think in the case of Marvel, they have a special circumstance that really didn't attach to Lucasfilm, and that is that after a solid, I don't know, what was it,
15
13, 14,
years.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
something like that, that they sort of felt that they could rest on their own laurels. They got a little fat and lazy. They assumed at a certain point that we're making $1 billion every movie, that's just going to go on into perpetuity, and now we can shovel anything at the audience and they're going to eat it up because everybody wants to consume everything. Now, Lucasfilm with Star Wars does have fans that are like that, the diehards, but it's still a relatively niche portion of the audience. Most of the Star Wars audience is normies who go for one movie ticket, maybe two if they're taking a family out for a second viewing. But almost all of the casual audience for Marvel did that. You had a casual audience that was acting like a diehard audience because they would go multiple times to see the movies and consume the content because it was all high quality. But once you got past Endgame, things changed, and I think that Marvel and Disney were slow to recognize that you still have to earn the audience dollar.
Well, Lauren, let me be a little bit more specific then in where I see the parallel, and then I'll get your take on this. The parallel that I see, I'm not sure. Well, I do see your point exactly on Marvel becoming lazy or complacent. I get that, but I think that there's another element to this, and that is that when we look at the sequel trilogy with Star Wars, I don't think that people wanted to be annoyed or negative about the character of Rey. I think that they generally liked her in the first movie, although they had great questions about how she was so powerful, and they wanted those answered in a substantive way. But the issue here is that, in my opinion, both Lucasfilm and Marvel, and then also the animation studios, when they have the opportunity, they have gone to a narrative structure where female heroes do not have to overcome obstacles necessarily in terms of gaining abilities or growing as a character. They're not flawed in the way that you would traditionally see. They begin and end in terms of their personality in relatively the same place. And what we end up watching is we sit down to a movie that goes nowhere. We just simply watch the characters move on the screen, but the end result is the good guys win, but the good guys didn't do much to do that other than some silly CGI action sequences. That's the parallel that I see. And I think that is what has driven away a lot of people from Disney content. Other than, I mean, separate that out from the divisive content, right? We know that they're doing things in children's programming that has just utterly sent parents out the door. But in terms of the narrative structure, they have made a choice, a conscious choice that some of their characters are not going to experience the hero's journey that's succeeded for, millennia. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that's what's plaguing storytelling as a whole, all over the place, is that when you have these characters who are front and center, not only do you want to see them struggle and overcome obstacles in order to uh, uh, gain new wisdom, but usually you demonstrate those flaws in such a way that the hero, they overcome one obstacle, they get a little bit cocky, they start thinking, well, gosh, I can triumph over the next obstacle easily, and their
Sure.
hubris gets the best of them. They encounter a setback, and usually it's a painful one, and that forces them to gain some humility. And the best example that I can give of that would be Ray. While I don't think that she was necessarily obnoxious in The Force Awakens, they did show that she had the character trait of impatience and anger. There were a couple of times that that came out, and yet there was never any real consequence for it. The one time that you did see something that could potentially be a consequence is when she got angry in The Rise of Skywalker, and suddenly she's shooting lightning bolts out of her fingertips, takes down a transport that supposedly has Chewie in it. And if that had been allowed to occur, um, I think the audience probably would hate her even more.
Yes, yes. I was going to say it may have.
But it would have been a
You don't want to barbecue Chewy. That's a
no,
bad. That's a bad place for your supposed hero.
no, you don't want to do it, but it would have been a real consequence, and it would have forced her to look at, what am I becoming? And
Maybe BB-8. Maybe she could have barbecued BB-8, and we all would have said, that's
well,
overcomable.
they did that in the beginning of the movie as well, because he was damaged, because again she was getting impatient and angry, and it got the better of her. So they were trying to hint at that dark turn that they never really fully committed to. And so as a result, especially when they almost immediately backtracked on the Chewy barbecuing, she never really had to learn anything. She never had to acknowledge the fact that, gosh, I have these dark tendencies. Maybe I ought to be looking at myself a little bit more. Even when she was faced with her dark twin in the mirror sequence on the Death Star, it was just sort of a, well, here's a moment of what you could become, but let's not worry about it. What's the next scene? And I think that's what a lot of movies are lacking now. You're not actually exploring the negative traits that could come along with having some elevated power over the other people in the story. Ray never really needed the other people around her, and that just it rendered everything that they did irrelevant. And it,
Yeah,
it
totally.
also it also exposes just why the subplot in the Last Jedi with Finn and Rose going off somewhere. It's like, well, what else were they going to do? They didn't need to be there. They didn't need to do
Well,
anything. We just let's set them off on this irrelevant subplot, and
well,
then we'll get back to the
let's
ratio.
pretend that there was a good writer, and in that case, I think that something could have been done with Ray that would have necessitated them being there. But anyway,
But but
I
to
do want to
do
ask
that,
you. Yes, go ahead.
to do that though, Finn would have had to have ascended to the spot that it was originally hinted that he was going to do, and I
Right,
think the
that he was going to
writers,
have. Yes,
they couldn't have him sharing the spotlight with Ray, and it's a real shame. He was honestly, I would have been a lot more interested in the Finn and Poe show than what we got with Ray.
absolutely. Now, one of the things that I'm curious about, Lorne, is Apple is getting into the box office game now. $1 billion this year, but probably more in the future. And the trades and the publications, they're missing this. I mean, they're just largely missing that this first year is like dipping their toes in the water. What this is all about is building relationships as Apple prepares to take on Disney with John Lasseter at the helm. Do you think that audiences, and I feel like this is just a softball question, but it needs to be asked honestly. Do you feel that audiences are primed and ready to go back to what we once had in terms of that classic Pixar storytelling that Disney controlled for 20 years?
Nah. who wants that? No, I mean, of course. I mean,
John Wick
it,
4, Top Gun Maverick, Lauren. It seems like everything that goes back to classic, you know, real tough heroes really winning seems like that's winning. Maybe animation's the same.
well, look, one of the things that we were talking about earlier this week was how rapidly Jonas is getting to his watch hours for monetization. And a lot of that is because he's exposing this children's content, or at least stuff that appears to be marketed to children. And exposing to parents things that they probably didn't know about. And when you have Disney Plus acting as a babysitter for kids in a lot of households, when parents become aware of that, they're not happy about it. You want to have a place that you think that your kids are safe to be able to consume entertainment that's going to teach them some life lessons about how to deal with adversity and how to deal with doubts and fears in life, and also acknowledging that life is scary. That's one of the things that Disney used to be good at. They used to be not afraid of portraying life as being scary and having scary elements,
Yeah,
but
Simba's dad dying, that's tough.
yeah, but you show kids that you can overcome this, you can survive this, and you can come out the other side and have more strength, more wisdom, and the ability to help others with what you've learned. That's something that seems to have been stripped away from modern storytelling is we're just marinating in cynicism and nihilism, and it's really
Oh, that's
sad.
you've nailed it. You are exactly right, Lauren, and I think that comes from a lot of these content creators having bought into the idea that life is meaningless or it's what you make of it, this postmodern idea that all life is power and your own assessment of what would make you happy. And I think that leaves audiences just empty and devoid of the meaning, just in the same way that the lives of people who adhere to that seem to be lacking.
Yeah, it's I look at humor a lot, and I tend to be a pretty sarcastic guy if you know me in real life, and a lot of sarcasm tends to dance on the knife's edge of cynicism and darkness. But there comes a point at which you're just choking on it, and
Yes.
I think that it's come to a point now where it would be nice to have a little bit of lighthearted levity, and I think that that would do society a lot of good.
And if Disney's not willing to do it, Lauren, other companies will. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Yeah, and there's no better time for somebody to step into that gap and fill the breach than right now. There's never gonna be a better opportunity when you have Disney in disarray, when to a large extent you've had Warner Brothers in disarray. It's like there's all kinds of studios struggling right now, and I think we're starting to see the pendulum turn. We're starting I made a list of movies, I think it was like 10 or 12 that I actually want to see this year. I didn't
Yes.
go to the theater but once or twice last year, and generally I was disappointed. So that's good. We've got some things coming on the horizon, but you've still got these studios that are struggling and trying to figure out what they're going to do. Now's the time to fill that gap. So
Now, as we get ready to wrap up, I do want to give you a shout out, Lauren, because I want people to know that you're not just a guest on my channel on a fairly regular basis. We actually have been doing this together for much longer, and that being that you have been an outstanding author over on thatparkplace.com. And just so people know, for the first year of that website's existence, it was one of the fastest growing uh, pop culture websites on the web. And then somebody decided that wasn't that wasn't good anymore, and we had to go through some stuff, and eventually had to get a new business to help out. But now that the website is back up and running at full capacity and will be for the foreseeable future, I really do hope people will start going over and checking content like this, where you talk about Rage of the Shadow Warriors, the Epic of Gilgamesh for Mandalorians. You do such a great job of diving deep into Star Wars lore and explaining things to people. And honestly, it gets me excited again for if there's ever a time that Lucasfilm will get out of the way and give fans what they want. It's just amazing. Here you go back to 1996 talking about that. For people who long for the golden eras of Star Wars, I just think they would have a wonderful time reading your content. So
well, thank you. A lot of what I wanted to do with some of the articles on the site is delve into some of the older stuff for newer fans who may have come in with the sequel trilogy who might not know about some of the older publications or know the seeds that are currently being explored in the newer content. I'm trying to show this is actually where some of this stuff came from. So if you're interested in the backstory and the lore, or even just the obscure stuff, that's something that I'd like to preserve and make sure that people will continue to be able to consume that if they want it.
fantastic. And folks, I do hope you'll click on the link to this article down in the description below and continue to follow Lorn both on Twitter and on That Park Place for all the latest content where he dives deep into what used to be with Star Wars and what we hope it will become once more. If you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms. When you click it, we're talking about that notification bell. We covet your comments. We care about what you think. This is not just two gentlemen speaking into a void. You're an important part of this dialogue, and we want to hear from you. We often respond. And don't forget that the Pro Show is now every Thursday, 5 to 7 p.m. The second episode will be this Thursday. We have a huge panel of guests, some old, some new, but you're going to love all of them, and I think you'll have a really good time checking that out. You want to check it out live because it only stays up on YouTube for 48 hours before it becomes members only. And yes, at 10,000 subs, we will be turning those memberships on. You are not going to want to miss that. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.